Hello everyone, welcome to ChessVisor, your wise choice to improve your chess. Let's talk about this game played between Magnus Carlsen and Pentala Harikrishna, and it was again from European Chess Club Cup round number 4. So if you are watching this channel for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel and press the bell icon to get notified for the future videos. So Magnus was handling white, so he opens the game with one c4. So Pentala replies with the move e5. We have pawn to g3, we have c6, pawn to d4, bishop to b4 check. After bishop to d2 blocking the check, and here Harikrishna simply exchange the bishop. So bishop takes d2 check and queen takes d2. And in this position, Harikrishna plays the move pawn to d6. In this position, actually white could go d takes e5 and d takes e5. They can play the queenless middle game like this. So knight c3 Nf6, bishop g2, bishop e6, b3. So like that the game can continue. And I think white doesn't have any advantage in this variation, and that's why Magnus wants to keep the queen on board, and he plays the move knight c3. Knight f6 developing, pawn to e4 gaining more space in the center. So castles by Harikrishna, and now we have knight ge2. So after knight ge2 he plays pawn to b5, expanding on the queen side and also questioning the c4 pawn. And after this move, simply Magnus captures on b5, and after c takes b5 and Magnus plays the move a3. It's kind of it gives the black to target that b4 point. So he starts with immediately with the a5. So he is going to play the move pawn to b4 at immediately or one point of time. So here Magnus goes bishop g2 and bishop b7 by Harikrishna, and here simply Magnus castles on the king side. So already, as you can see, white has completed his development, and black needs to figure out about this knight, and he has to develop the queen. And many of the variations are many times the engine was suggesting queen b6 idea to target this b2 or something like that, or to push the pawn. And also once the knight develops, the rook would be connected. So that's the point of playing queen b6, and Pentala Harikrishna would play that move at one point of time. So let's continue the game here. So b4, 8x b4, 8x b4, and now we have pawn, knight to d5. And in this position, actually Harikrishna exchanges the knight here. So knight takes d5, and bishop takes d5 is also possible. So knight takes d5 and then e takes d5, and now Harikrishna plays the move queen b6. And after this move, Magnus simply exchanges one pair of rook here. So after bishop takes a8, he goes d takes e5, and after d takes e5, and here he plays the move pawn to g4. It's a deep understanding. I'll explain what's that move about it. So let's go back here. So we have to evaluate this current position. So what's going on like that? So let's say black has to I think he still he needs to figure out this knight. He has to develop this knight, and as far as development is concerned, white has completed. And most importantly, the b4 is a weak pawn, and also b2 is a weak pawn. And for black, he has the majority thing on the king side. So 4 to 3 majority. And white has this isolated queen's pawn situation. It's kind of a weak pawn now already. And now black will try to target that pawn. I think he needs to black this pawn with a knight somehow. So he has to remaneuver such a manner to block the pawn. So here Magnus plays g4, thinking about this square. So he wants to control this square with the pawn, so that he can put the knight on f5 at one point of time. Otherwise black could play the move pawn to f5 himself. So let's go back and let's say some natural move. Let's say Magnus attacks the bishop, which is undefended. So knight d7, now the bishop is defended. Knight c1, knight d3, and now comes the move knight c1, f5. And now as you can see, the f5 is in already. So this is kind of black could easily carry out the counter attack thing, and white needs to be very careful here. So let's say knight d3, queen d4. So tactical idea. So you cannot take b4 with either one of your pieces. So that's it. So going back in the game, he plays g4, stopping that idea, and also probably is going to put the knight on g3 and then to f5 and then maybe to e3. So in the game, finally Harikrishna in the 18th move, he develops the knight to d7, knight g3. Here comes the move g6, stopping knight f5 idea. But now rook c1 grabbing the c file, rook to d8, knight e4, and here comes knight f6. So here Magnus simply exchanges the knights here, and after that Magnus plays rook c5, queen b6 by Hari, queen e3, and now after queen a7, kind of shuffling moves for 2-3 tempos. So queen c1, bishop b7, h4, and now after queen b6, Magnus continued to push his h pawn now, h5. So here he stops it with a h6. It's a tactical move, so you cannot grab the free pawn as your rook will be hanging. So queen e3, and now Harikrishna simply lost his patience and he grabbed the pawn on h5. And this move allowed Magnus to play this brilliant move, that is rook to c8. So what it does, it actually it is a tactical move. Basically your queen is hanging, you have to defend the rook as well as the queen, so you cannot grab the rook as your queen would hang, and if you grab the queen, then I think white would insert this move and then he will capture the queen back and you are lost. So that is not possible. So in the game Harikrishna plays the move queen to d6, so stopping or defending the threat on the rook. But in the ending, after rook takes d8 check, queen takes d8, and here Magnus grabs on h6, and after bishop takes d5 he simply pins the pins the bishop, and after h takes g4, actually in this position the right way to continue the game is maybe to play something like instead of grabbing the center pawn, I could go queen h4 like this, but then queen h5, g takes h5, king f8, still white is kind of better, or I think he is winning. Going back in the game, he plays bishop takes d5. He is giving up the bishop for 2 pawns, queen to d2, h takes g4, queen takes d5, takes d5, bishop takes d5, and now he plays the move king g7. So Magnus goes king g2, f5. It looks like black is going to manage with these pawns, but the thing is the piece is never, I think it is never be equal to the 2 pawns, right? And that he will demonstrate in a moment here. So king g3, king f6, king h4, penetrating into the black's camp, e4. So after this Hari plays the move, Magnus plays the move bishop to c6, kind of a waiting move, and after king e5 he goes king g3, and you cannot push f4 here as your g4 is hanging, so he goes king to d4 in case if you play say for example in this position he plays king to d4, but after king f4 he goes king to d3, and finally he gives up 1 pawn here, so king takes f5, e3, but after f takes e3, king takes e3, Magnus plays the move pawn to b3, so there is no stopping, and the bishop would easily defend this light square pawn, and in the next move he is going to capture this pawn, right? It's a completely lost position, and that's why in this position Harikrishna Pentala gives up the game and he resigns the game. So here if we consider something like pawn to g3, then say for example king to g4 can be played, king f2, king h3, stopping g2, and this is still white is going to simply win the game. Another important variation or another variation to show, it is simply to play something like king to d4. So another variation, king d4. So king takes g4, then king c3. So white can easily grab the pawn and try to promote the pawn like this. Let me show you that quickly. King b2, king f3, king c3, king e3, king b2, king d3, king a3, then king c2, king a2, and then king d3, king b2, king d4. So in this position actually white could go to king c4 in the next move or in a couple of moves. So king c5, and then can finally capture the pawn, and then this pawn is rolling and black king cannot stop it. So that is why, considering I think it's a very well-known ending for grandmasters, and that's why he simply resigns the game over here. I hope you enjoyed this quick commentary on this game, so please give it a thumbs up, and still if you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to the channel and press the bell icon to get notified for the future videos. As usual, this is Chess Wiser, your wise choice to improve your chess.